When I was around the age of 18 years old, I had one of the worst nights and days of my life, and it completely shaped the entire future of how it was going to go from that point on. I wasn't expecting it to change in that night. Thought I was just taking some acid, otherwise known as LSD, Sally or Sid, as some people may know it as, with some friends. And instead of having a time that I thought was going to be fun, I actually found out I was a type 1 diabetic, and it was probably one of the most terrifying and mortifying things that I possibly could have imagined. At the time, I thought I was just some healthy kid. I'd never really experienced any sort of health problems besides like maybe some mental things like most people do at teenage years of thinking that they're edgy, depressed, or anxious. But I wasn't perfect. I had all these problems. I had horrible habits like smoking weed or having nicotine issues, and that was long before I had even turned 18 at the time. Just making stupid choices, trying to show off for friends, or making myself look like an idiot when I thought I was making myself look cooler or older than I thought I was. I was going out partying. I had the mindset of every other young guy at the time and didn't have my mindset on straight things whenever I should have. And honestly, I felt invincible at the time. Besides me feeling invincible, I definitely was not. And I started to realize that after this huge diagnosis that happened. But before I got diagnosed, let's cut to the night before. Now, whenever I was hanging out with my friends at the time, we had done like normal high school things, like party, drink, smoke, unfortunately, and do stupid things just like every other high schooler. Well, unfortunately, I had been hanging out with the wrong crowd for a little too long, and I got my hands on some acid at the time. And it wasn't just like, oh, this is my first time doing this. I had done this probably 2 or 3 times before with some other friends, and I was telling these two other guys about it that were in my hometown. And they thought it was the coolest experience ever, but they were terribly wrong whenever they had their first experience. And unfortunately, one of them had their first experience with me, and I wasn't necessarily a good trip sitter and trip partner at the time because I was just some dumb high school kid that thought that he knew everything and was on top of the world. I mean, I had all these problems like nicotine fiending. I was constantly looking for the next strain or pot to smoke at the time. And I wasn't always on top of, being anti anxiety around my friends. Sometimes I felt like I was causing the problems instead of helping them. And unfortunately, I kind of did that throughout that night whenever we were actually tripping. We found ourselves getting some acid and hanging out in the parking lot in high school. And it turned out that one of my friends at the time, because I was hanging out with two other guys, one of them decided he was going to have to go home. His dad had called them. He was super pissed and told him he needed to be home because I guess he just didn't have good enough grades or something for him to be going out and hanging out with friends at the time. And unfortunately, he made the terrible idea to go ahead and take that acid that we had gotten before he got home. And I don't know what was on his mind thinking that it was going to be a good idea to do that by himself because I had already forewarned him, like, dude, you don't want to do this on your own, especially if it's your first time. You really want to be with someone that knows a little bit about what's going to happen. But I guess he just didn't believe me and didn't take my advice, so he went ahead and took it anyway. My other friend, he decided that we should just go ahead and take ours too so that we could at least peak at the same time because I guess he had done a little bit of research beforehand and noticed and realized that if you take it around the same time, you're going to feel high around the same time, which I don't blame him for. I think it's a good idea to kind of look into what you're going to do before you do it, but I don't condone anyone doing it anyway. Well, anyway, my friend eventually had left, the one that had his dad call, and my other buddy was like, all right, well, what are we going to do now? And he had already gotten approved from his parents that he could come and hang out with me and stay the night at my house. So I decided that we should go get some snacks from the gas station and then head there. Well, on our way to get snacks from the gas station, he started kind of like pre-tweaking, I guess, and I know he wasn't feeling it yet, but I think he thought he was, and he completely underestimated it. But I remember his eyes were getting huge fast, so I told him we need to get home now. So we basically sped home in his Mustang, and I was worried he was going to crash the whole time, so I was just praying that we actually made it without any problems, and luckily we did. But unluckily, we forgot about my other friend that went home on his own, so we didn't talk to him throughout the entire night. and forgot that he was tripping too. Well, whenever me and my other friend were staying the night together, we were playing Fortnite, we were listening to music, letting LED lights go all over the room, you know, tasting the sound, seeing the sound, and everything that you could imagine was going on. We could hear the colors all across the room. And I guess we just thought that we were free and that we didn't feel anything whenever it was like actually peaking. And we weren't aware of anything else going on, so we forgot about my buddy. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't a good idea. Because by the time the sun came up, we started to think about what else was going on outside of the room and outside in the world. And we started to realize that we had forgotten about our friend. Well, we decided to call him and see how he was doing and how it was going. And I remember him answering the FaceTime call, and all we saw was a pitch black room. So he sat in the darkness the entire time, and he told us he wanted us to come pick him up. So I said, sure, we can go do that. We decided to go pick him up, and he wanted to go to the lake. So did my other friend. So we went ahead and drove out there. You know, it's peaceful. It's the morning time. It's a great time to be out at the lake, especially while you're tripping. You know, it's not going to be super stressful. You don't have to worry about much. But that was a terrible idea. The lake was about 15-20 minutes out from where I lived, and I had forgotten that I needed to be at a haircut appointment that my mom had set whenever I was not thinking about it and only thinking about being high. Terrible sun activities. And she had called me while we were out there and said that I needed to get home so that we could go and get my haircut. So I said, guys, we gotta leave. We decided to go. My friend was tweaking out, and my other buddy was just super quiet. I guess he was just demoralized after the whole trip, just on the come down. And after dropping my buddy off, and then my other friend was like, all right, well, it's good hanging out. I'll talk to you later. I said my goodbyes, and then I went around and got my haircut. Well, I remember sitting in that chair and staring at myself and seeing how fat my pupils were, thinking, oh God, everybody knows. And I don't think everyone did, but you know, that tweaker feeling just got into my head, and I just got so much anxiety the whole time. And I decided that I was just going to be fine. I'm going to chill as soon as I get home. And I remember laying down on my bed and just passing out when I got back. And it was the worst wake up that I could have imagined. My mom came into my room, and just a few weeks before I had gotten a blood and a piss test, thinking that I was going to be good, nothing's going to show up, as long as they don't test for weed. I was chilling, and I'd gotten it because I was in a depressive episode during the time of seeing a therapist and having all these mental issues. I didn't know what was going on, and I was just needing help at the time. Well, after getting my blood test and my pee tested, my mom had woken me up after that whole thing of tripping all night and not getting any sleep, probably about 15 minutes into me just laying down. And I remember her busting through my door and going, we need to go to the hospital right now. I don't know if it was the tripping that got to me, or if it was just anxiety, or me not knowing what was going on at the time, but I remember hyperventilating in my bed, like thinking, holy crap, she knows. I'm about to get my stomach pumped. They're about to remove my brain. All the blood's going to be recirculated out of my body and back in. They're going to clean me out. They're going to, bleach my skin. I don't know. I was tweaking out thinking that they knew somehow that I was tripping. But luckily and unluckily, that wasn't the case. Well, it turns out whenever I got to the hospital, they admitted me into the ER. And I was just confused the entire time, thinking, what is going on? They know that I'm high on drugs, or is there something wrong with me? And I had no clue. Well, they hooked me up to some IVs, and I remember laying there for maybe an hour or so. And if you've ever seen the movie or show Queen's Gambit, where the chick is like a chess master and she can kind of like see the pieces move on the ceiling tiles, that was me. I remember looking up at the ceiling tiles and seeing like a chessboard almost that was just moving, and all these different pieces were going into different shapes and formations that I just couldn't draw out if I even tried at this point. But I remember the doctor walking in while I'm just imagining this fake world going on around me, and she sat down with a clipboard and she told me real slowly, sir, I believe you're diabetic. and your blood sugar is 3 or 4 times as high as it normally should be. And she showed me the piece of paper, and it showed that my blood milligram per dialiter in sugar was around 720. And if you know anything about blood sugar stability of, taking care of your pancreas, it should be about, well, a seventh of that. It should be around a buck to a buck 20 or 100 to a 120. And that's like a normal, consistent range. That's what it should be staying at. Even after you eat a little bit of sugary food, it should be around that point, not too high, not too low. But I was about 7 times that. And she told me that she was surprised I was still awake and that I should be in a comatose. And I remember my mom just sitting next to me holding my hand, thinking probably that I was dying. And I was thinking, holy shit, I'm glad I'm not getting caught for tripping. Well, it turns out I wasn't glad. I was actually really upset to find this out. I remember just breaking down, bawling, crying, and my mom was like, "What are you even crying for? You don't know what's going on." And I was like, I feel terrible. Like, I remember my head was hurting, the room was started spinning, my stomach started getting really queasy. I started getting that sick feeling that, whenever you ate too much, but you feel like you're gonna throw up, and you also feel sick. That's entirely what I was feeling at the time. And it was a horrible feeling. I remember just being so confused and terrified of everything that was going to happen to me, and in disbelief and denial almost. And I had to learn what type 1 diabetes really meant for me. And I thought that I just wasn't going to be able to eat any of the food that I liked. And that was the scary part, was not knowing, but also having somewhat of an understanding that it had to do with what I was going to be able to eat, and that I didn't know that I was going to have to stab myself every single day and make hundreds of decisions that most people don't even think twice about. And I just remember the regret that I had, and the anger, and the horrible sadness that I felt after going home and having a meeting with a dietitian talking about what I could and couldn't eat and what I needed to do to be able to maintain it and take care of it. And I'd gotten a list all written out onto a brown paper bag of how much insulin I needed to take per carbohydrate that I was consuming, so that I could keep the milligrams per dialiter in my body correctly flowing and be the physical pancreas that I needed for myself. And that kind of built a ton of discipline for me. I started learning over time exactly what amount I needed to take of insulin for fast acting or slow acting. And I remember the difficulty of going back to school the next week, of trying to explain to my teacher that I'm diabetic and I need to have a different kind of care sought after myself. And I wasn't necessarily the goody two-shoes kid. I remember my teacher thought that I was lying or joking about it at first. And then I showed her the doctor's note that proved that I had an endocrinologist and I had prescriptions with me all the time. I showed her the finger prick tool that I had and the blood sugar sensor that I needed to put the blood into to read it. And her face just kind of went pale and her jaw dropped. And I just thought, holy crap, I just blew this woman's mind. She probably felt so bad for me because I'd caused all these problems, and I know that I wasn't the best kid in her class, but I think she felt bad for me. And I had this huge sense of gratitude that she kind of showed me that she cared and made sure that I got taken care of. She always let me go to the office after this point so that I can take care of my blood sugars. And she made sure to even check up on me and be like, hey, you need anything? I've got crackers under my desk if you need anything that you could possibly imagine. I was just so thankful and grateful at the time that I felt like I was being really cared for after so long of me being such a little jerk throughout the entire time of my high school career to some of these teachers, not knowing that these might be some of the only people that actually care about me on a truly deeper level than just being some worker or being somebody that's like a stranger. And I'll never forget that. It really changed my perspective on things, of how some people can really be there for you and some people just couldn't care less. And everything changed for me. My life completely split on the instant that I found that I was diabetic. And who would have thought that years later down the line, it'd be like a running joke that I found out that I was diabetic while tripping on acid on a come down of something that I thought was going to be a great time, turning into a life changing time that I'll never forget. And I was never going to be ready for that. And I don't think anything could have prepared me for it. I had never experienced one night that was going to change my life forever, just like that one did. And I don't think I ever will either, until something absolutely crazy pops up in my life, which I'm really hoping doesn't to that extent. I don't think anything's going to top that experience, at least for me. The emotions that followed with me finding out that I'm diabetic, to coming down from the acid, realizing that this is real life, to being as lucky as I was to know that I wasn't in trouble for being on drugs. I was in trouble for my own body, I guess. I had to come to the realization that I had to take care of me and nobody was going to come to save me. That kind of ties in with how this whole channel really falls into. You know, you have to really take care of yourself and you have to be disciplined with what you're doing to your body and what you're doing with your life, because you never know when it's going to change on a dime. And that's what really shaped my perspective and changed the understanding of the person I really am. Is that I have to take everything seriously to a point that, I need to hold myself accountable to it. And that's with it being with my money, with my discipline, with understanding my health, with everything that I'm doing. And this isn't medical advice or any sort of advice at all. If you do take anything away from this, it's that you shouldn't do drugs and you should care about your body and the people around you. Because you never know if that's going to be the healthiest way you're going to live or the healthiest last day of your life. And I'm really glad that I actually learned from these things and these mistakes that I've made. Because I truly do believe that I'd be in a worse place now if I didn't have this experience. And I'm glad that I definitely got diagnosed and had the problems going on so that I could find out what was going on with myself. Because if I didn't, I might not be here talking about it today. And I really hope that you guys can take some sort of takeaway from this, and that's that you shouldn't do drugs. Do anything but what I say and what I do, besides maybe the good parts like taking care of yourself, taking care of your mind, and taking care of your body. Because truly at the end of the day, that is all you're going to have in this life. There's only two things that are guaranteed. That's death and taxes. And if you do enjoy this video or this little story time, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll see ya.